Hi, this is Will, and we were going to do a factory I/O little video here, and the one we're going to do is an automated warehouse. Now we're going to do this with Siemens S7 1200 PLC simulator. So it's a simulator which is, really great, and you don't need a PLC to make it work. Now, one of the things, I think you can get a 3-week free tryout of that. You'll have to look at the Siemens webpage and be sure. For sure, you can get a 1-month free trial of the factory I/O. So we're going to do this automation warehouse. Now, what I did for my scene is I just put in one extra sensor, and I don't think you really need it. On second thought, after I, did the actual programming, but this extra retroreflective sensor right here, I put that in. But again, I don't think you need it. So what we can do is now, if you don't know, these buttons up here are really important when you're working with the factory I/O. This is the run button, so now it's in run mode. When it's not like that, it's in edit mode, and you can add components, but you shouldn't really need it for what you're trying to do if you're just starting out. If you're pretty good at experience, then you already know what it does. This is pause, so you can pause it and stop the stuff from moving. This is a reset, and this is a clock, or it's like a little timer that you can change the speed. This is shown at half speed right here. That's full speed, half speed, and if you want really good detail, you can go down to 1/10 the speed, and that can get you to stop it really accurately. We have a control panel here for start and stop, and we'll be using that quite a bit because probably be making some mistakes. The other thing I always do is when I'm doing these projects, I like to control everything. Normally by default the emitter, which is the down arrow, is turned on, and the remover, which is the up arrow, red arrow, is turned on also. And you can kind of see if we dock all tags. The actuators are green. The sensors are orange. The sensors that are right now turned on are lit up. So my retroreflector right here is lit up because it's on, and it shows as the turned on color is kind of that golden color. And it's turned on because it's a retroreflector. So it's sending out a signal, and then it's bouncing back into the sensor. That's why it's turned on. And the way the best thing about factory I/O, I think, if you're starting out on this, well, the two best things. The best thing is that you get the 30-day free trial. And the second best thing is you can force all these signals on so you can understand how the program should work. And then you can write your code to reflect that. And again, there's no one right way to write a program, but there's a lot of ways to write it wrong. I know that. If you click on the green circle here, that's for the emitter, and you'll see a box drop. So, like we were talking about, if we didn't want to do that, we can just reset it, and it goes away. So, to start out, what we need to do, you can see these sensors, or the actuators, are like this entry conveyor. We've got another one for this load conveyor. And then we have some of these for like the forks, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what we'll do is we'll force on the emitter. Now we can release it. Now what we need to do is turn on this entry conveyor. Now what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to turn it on, and then I'm going to use this pause button right here to pause it right when it gets to that retroreflective sensor that I added. And that was kind of the reason I added it, because at this point I also want to turn on this load conveyor, and I wanted a signal to identify when to turn it on. But again, I think you can do that without it. So let's take a look. So we're not quite at the sensor, but we're pretty close. So now we're going to turn on the load conveyor. So now we've got both of these turned on, and we want to turn it on until we get to this at load signal, and that's this sensor right here. And because I want to be a little more accurate, I'm going to turn it to half speed. and we're going to unpause it. And as soon as I see this go from golden to white, which means it's going from high to low, because again, at load is presently in the high condition, I'm going to try to stop it, and I want to get it as close as possible to that point. Okay, so that's pretty close. Now, you know, when you're actually programming it, you're going to have it exact because you're going to program it correctly. So now, when we're going into loading it, right, if maybe we can kind of get on top of it, but right over here, come on. So right over here we have this, it's kind of like a forklift. And let me just show you what happens when we go forks right. And unpause it. The forks go that way. Now if I release them, they go back to the middle position. And you've got to be in this middle position right here. This has to be high before you can start moving any boxes or even these metal containers to the shelving area. So what we want to do right now is we want the forks to be left. And that puts it right underneath our crate. Now when we have it left, we also need to lift it off the conveyor so it doesn't get tangled up with the conveyor. So we can lift it up. Now at this point, when it's fully lifted, we can release this and get it back into the middle position. And now we're pretty free and clear to transfer it. And hopefully we aren't going to catch on anything. It doesn't look like we will. Now this is an important part. So right now it starts out as target position 0, and the way all the shelving is this is position 1 right here. This is position 2, position 3, position 4, 5. It goes up, there's 9 positions each row. So then this one would be position 10. Now this target position is where you want to load it. So we want to put it in that first position. And when we do that, it goes right to that position. Now you have to do some things with that fork right. You've got to, well, I mean, I suppose I can. So we've got the fork right, and then we release the lift, and then it puts it in position, and then we release the forks right, and it goes back in. So now to get back to this position here, you've got to put in the target position 100. And as soon as I click outside the box, it'll move right back to the starting or home position. And now we can go to any other position. So if I wanted, you know, we talked about this one above it being position 10. So if I wanted to go to that position, I could just do that. And when I click outside, it goes right to that position. So you can unload in this position here. Now, one of the things that I want to show, and it's really important also, is these moving X and moving Z's. While the carriage is moving, or the lift is moving, these will be turned on. When it is fully stopped, they'll be turning off. And when we want to do anything as far as, you know, moving to position, moving back from position, we need to make sure that these are both fully stopped. So if I put it back into, you know, our final position, which is 100, as soon as I click on it outside, you'll see these go on. And then when it's fully in position, you'll see them both go off. And they kind of, I'm not quite sure which one goes off first or second. Depends on how you're lifting, but watch how both of these go on. And then when it's at its home position, they both go off. Okay, and that looked like Z turned off before X did. But that's neither here nor there. You have to have them both off. Now that's really important. So let me just pause for a second here and show you kind of like the I don't know, timing diagram or the sequence of events that needs to happen to make this work. So hang on a second. Okay, so this is my timing diagram. It's a little hard to see, but right up here is the emitter, and that's going to go high. We're just going to drop a box, and then we have our at entry, and when the box is on top of that sensor, it's going to be low, and then when it passes by, it's going to go high. But when it goes low is when we turn on, this is our entry conveyor, and this is the retroreflective sensor. And when that signal goes low, we want to turn on that load conveyor. And then when we get at the load, that's the loading point, is where we move the forks left. And when they get to the at left position, here's where we start our movement. And every time you change that target position, it will start to move automatically. You don't have to give it a command to move. All you have to do is start the move. So you have the position where you lift up, and you have it lifted up right here. Right now it's in the lifted position, it's ready to move. And when you're ready to move, as soon as you change that position to 1, so you're saying I want to go to that first load position, it starts to move again to the load position. And then when it stops, what you need to do is turn the forks right, and then when they're at right, then you release the lift signal and it sets it on the shelving. And so after it does that, and even when you're lifting it up and setting it down on the shelving, that does activate those move Z or move X signals. So every time it stops, we're going to increment a counter, and this is what we call our mode. So when we're getting ready to go to the first position, we call it mode 0, and then when we move to the position, it's mode 1. When we're setting it on the shelf, it's mode 2, and then when we're moving back home, it's mode 3. And to get back in mode 3, as soon as we get back, and when we move it, and so when we load that signal into the target position is when we're at that middle position. Because if we're not at the middle position, we're going to clang into some form of the structure. So that's the way we're going to plan everything. I'm going to take a little break, and then we're going to turn on the code and take a look at the actual PLC code. Okay, now this is our PLC code, and I don't know if it's easy or hard to see, but this one it's hard for me to figure out. But this is actually the little function block that comes from Factory I/O, and this allows the PLC to talk to the Factory I/O, and for PLCSim. If you have a regular PLC, you are not going to have this block. But anytime you're working with PLC, you need to have that block. And again, you can just go into the instructions from Factory I/O, and it's in the tutorials, and they show you how to set it up. And so this is our main block. This is just some of those edge triggers that we were talking about. We want to do certain things when the signal goes negative or positive. But here's the one that I was talking about before. This is the moving X and the moving Z. They both have to be in the inactive state, and when that happens, we send out a trigger pulse. So it's a 1-scan pulse, and that is what is the motion stop strobe. So that means our motion has stopped. We can advance to the next step. So we have a counter in here that we use to advance from, we can show you pretty quickly here. So what we have is mode 0 is the get pallet and lift it up. And after we finish that, when we have the motion stopped strobe, then we go into mode 1. We just increment that. And that's where we move to position. And then we have mode 2 is where we set the pallet down on the frame structure. And then when we have mode 3 is where we move to home. So that's what these modes are. And here's just our standard start-stop logic. it's pretty standard seal-in circuit, except we have this next box. So we have the first box that we originally do the first time around when we press the start button. When we press the start button, and I always have this start process signal, but when we have start process and start press push button, we'll get the emitter. But then we need something for the second time around, and that's what we just call next box. It's a seal-in circuit with the emitter here, and it turns it off when it's at entry signal. Same with the entry conveyor, and this pretty much follows that timing diagram I showed. So, when the entry conveyor signal, entry conveyor signal off, turns this off. And then we have, when we finish the process and we get this next box, what we do is we're just incrementing. So we're just going from one position to the next position, loading across the bottom. And then here we have load conveyor logic. It'll run the load conveyor until we're not in the load position. And then here, when we're in the load position, we'll go forks left until we're not in mode 1, and we'll see a little bit more with that. And then lift, we do that until we get this lift down pulse. And here's where we control the mode. So the mode is going to stay there until we get the first motion control stop, and then we put 1 into the mode bit. So now our mode bit is 1. And now we take the target spot, which initially is going to be position 1, and as soon as we get mode 1, and when we are at the middle, we have to be at the middle, and that's when we load the target spot, which is going to be 1 to start out, into the target position. And the target position is the bit that, when we change that target position, the lift device actually moves to that position. So it's by virtue of changing this target position that makes that, automated warehouse move. We don't give it a signal that says move to position. All we do is change this, whatever value is in there. If it changes, the thing moves. And so the same thing here is when we're at mode 1 and we get the stop bit, we move it into mode 2, and we also move the forks right. And along that line is, so we move the forks right, and then when we get into mode 3 is when we set it down. And when we set it down, we also put the target position of 100 in there. So that's what moves it back home. And that's it. And then when we get the motion control stop there, when we're in mode 3, we set it back to 0 because we're back home. And then there's some logic for the lights. And that's about all we have. So we can download this code and see what happens. And because we're doing PLCSim, it's not like your regular, we do download to device. And sometimes this takes a while. And if it does take a while, because it is a simulator, it runs slower than actually running to a PLC. And well, actually, I think I didn't want to do that. So what I want to do is I want to go into online, and now I want to do simulation start. And the starting simulations will disable all other online interfaces. That's okay. And this is the part that may take a while. And what you get is a little icon of what you would see if you were looking at the PLC. And well, I am going to slow this down and be right back. Okay, so this is a little icon control panel for the thing, and here's where we actually download to the device. And sorry I didn't get that right, but and we can start searching for the devices. This is the PLC we want, and this is by default, but we still have to kind of do the search for it before we can load to it. At least that's what I'm hoping. And you can see up here it talks about that's the interface, but it's saying it's PLCSim. So let's give it a little time. The PLCSim is a little slower, but now we have it. And now that it comes back here and it says, yeah, I know what that is, and it's saying it's a simulation. So we can load it. And as we load it and it starts loading, you'll see this amber block. Yeah, whatever. It'll start blinking green and amber, and that's actually what happens on the PLC. And when that happens, it'll go into the run mode, and then we'll be ready to roll. But again, because it's all software, it takes a little longer than with the actual hardware. And yeah, this will take some time. But after we get that, we can put it online, and then we can take a look at our what happens with our factory I/O. So we can, and I shouldn't have. So anyway, that shows what's happened. And now this says start modules. What we want to do is we do want to start the module, because you can see here it's not in the run mode yet. If it was in the run mode, it would be green. And so now is where it's going to finish loading, and you can see now it's blinking, and there it's going to be green, and now we're in good shape. So we can go online, and when everything goes correctly, there should be a bunch of green bubbles in this column over here. You can see the first one show up. And now we can turn the monitoring on off, and we can try to get him out of the way. And move him to the top. And sorry I minimized this guy too soon, but we need to put him back in the corner so we can take a look at what's happening with the factory I/O. And you know what's going to happen is I'm going to reset it so we've got no boxes here. And now the first box is going to go in this position, then it'll start moving all the way across here, 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 here. And you know, you can take a look at this target position and see what's happening as it goes back, and you know, as each of the devices are put in there. Come on. Now, one thing we need to make sure of is we'll go into File, Drivers. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do before we get going, you can see that the driver is Siemens S7 PLCSim. That's what we want. Last thing is we need to connect the two together. And when we should get, and again this is going to take a little while, but we should get a green circle with a check mark in front of it, or inside of it, and that'll tell us we're all connected, and we should be ready to go. And as this is becoming a long video, what we'll do is we'll let it run so that that first row is all filled up, and then we'll maybe put 1 or 2 in the second row just so you can see that, yeah, it works. So we've got our green check mark, we're ready to go. We can go in here, and again you can watch what's happening with this target position, and you can watch you know, these signals go from high to low, and they go high, you know, either when you're lifting it or setting it down, or when you're changing this target position. So it's not just the target position, it's also the lift and the setting it back down. So I think we are ready to go, and here's our start push button, and here comes our first box, and let's try to get an angle on it. And again, make sure that it doesn't move until these are both off, and that is what moves you to the next step. So every time both of these are off, you're moving to another step. And you can see this is position 2. And then when it's going back home, this guy will change to 100. And pretty easy. I just say that, but there's a lot of things that you need to be careful for in your logic. And that one got caught on something. So that didn't go in quite clean. But sometimes I can blame that on the Factory I/O software, because sometimes it does that kind of glitchy every once in a while. I'll try to get more right on top of this so we can see if these things are going in correctly. Okay, that's position 5. When we get to position 9, that'll be the last one on the first row, and then we go over to start the second row. And that's the easiest way to do it. Now, if you wanted to, you could load it in any pattern, presumably you wanted, but the easiest thing right now is just to increment that, load it, and then maybe you can load it. Now, there's also something in here that I didn't read the instructions for it, but it says that you can unload these things. It's not exactly sure to me. Well, I mean, I guess I'd have to make another video, but this one's too long, so there might be a part 2. Okay, so this is 7. And this one would be if you don't have PLCSim, and I'm going to make a video for what this would look like in Control I/O, which is the built-in program that comes with Factory I/O, and it's a great program. That's a good thing for using it. Now, you notice that what I did, this PLC program was all ladder logic. The thing with Control I/O is it's a functional block diagram type, or function block diagrams is what you use. So it's a little different format. If you only have Control I/O, I don't think just copying the schematic for that from what I had for the Siemens PLCSim is going to help you out too much. But if you understand the relation between function block diagrams and ladder logic, maybe it is. Now this one is going to load in right in this position right here. And you can see when it loads in, it's going to be position 10. And I guess we'll do one more box, and because we're almost at 30 minutes, and that's a pretty long video. So best of luck doing this. And again, I think it's pretty challenging. You got to think about it. So that is the automated warehouse factory I/O with the Siemens 07 PLC. Thank you.